Welcome to EDO Breakthrough, the podcast where we tackle economic development challenges head on. From small towns to bustling cities, every place has its own hurdles to overcome. The EDO Breakthrough podcast creates an environment of collaboration, innovation, and understanding where we can share our real-life challenges and brainstorm solutions. I'm your host, Sandy Dubé, a certified economic developer and founder of PPR Strategies. Each week, we'll be welcoming a different, brilliant, place-based mind to talk through real-life economic development challenges that have been shared with us by you, our gracious listeners. Today, I'm joined by attorney and fellow certified economic developer, Tray Hairston. Trey, before we get started, I'd love to hear a few minutes of introduction for yourself and get our audiences to know you a little bit better.
Hi, Sandy. It's so good to see you again. It's been about, 2 months since we last saw each other, and hopefully we'll get into that, our fun time in Montana. But for your listeners, my name is Tray Hairston. I am a partner at Butler Snow LLP, which is a full-service law firm that has 29 offices throughout the country, 2 international offices. And I practice within the firm's public finance, tax incentives, and credit markets group. And so I have spent a lot of time throughout my career, both on the public side of transactions and private side of transactions, whether it's a public offering going into the capital market with an official statement, and we're selling debt to thousands of investors, or it's on the private side of a transaction and it's a developer with a Topgolf or a hotel or manufacturing. I feel at ease.
Awesome. Well, okay. And so for our listeners, we are not going to talk all things bond financing or big deal structuring. We're going to talk about mentorship. We're going to talk about brain drain that some parts in the country are seeing. And I am dying to hear about this, your recent speech at a convocation at your university. So I think that we've got lots to get into. We will also just continue to tease out our first meeting and maybe reference that, or we just dive in and talk about it right now. I'm not sure what would be best.
I say right now, Sandy, let's just dive right in and go for it.
Okay, good. So, yes, Trey and I met at the IEDC Rural Retreat. We were both there early. Trey is on the board of IEDC, and PPR Strategies, my company, we've been supporting IEDC and some of their marketing efforts for the last couple of months now. And we were going to an outing, and I offered to drive, and Trey took me up on the offer and jumped into the car. Crazy boy. I don't think you'd do it again, would you?
I mean, I would. I think it was an adventure. It was absolutely an adventure. I was a little afraid at times, not gonna lie. Sandy did not rent a 4-wheel drive vehicle in Montana, so that was probably mistake number 1. And we did a little off-terrain, off-site, got a little turned around, but that's okay. We found our bearings, and it was, we got a chance to really get to know each other. We talked about kids and life and work. We talked about stress. I talked about how my wife and kids got me stand-up comedy lessons one year after a particularly tough year. That was my Christmas present. And for about 3 or 4 months, I would drive from Jackson to New Orleans, and
which is 2 hours one way, right?
It's about 2.5 hours, and I would do that every Sunday. Sometimes I would go down on a Saturday night, my wife and I would do the class on the Sunday, and it was a 3-hour class, and everybody was in this class, all walks of life. Someone who was probably in their 70s. There was a stripper, there was a trans person in the class, there were actors in the class, and then there was me. a stressed out, burnout, overworked lawyer trying to tell jokes. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself, and I learned how to, most importantly, make Sandy Dubé laugh for about an hour as we were traversing Montana trying to find the ranch. So we had a great time.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. So true. Yeah, so in my defense, I didn't know we were going to be off-roading. So and we probably wouldn't have if we used a different navigation system other than me probably, or we used like an old school map or something. I
Sure.
don't
Right.
but yes, and we talked about everything from work and family and kids to race and rural communities and yeah, economic development. But yes, comedy. I don't know. I don't think I've talked about it on this podcast, but golly, I just love a good comedian. So, ready, Trey, go.
Yeah.
Let's see. No, I'm just kidding. But it was a great time, and we had fun eventually doing some four-wheel riding and running around in the rain in rural Montana, and it was absolutely beautiful. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed going on that little adventure with you, so thank you. Well, we could turn this into the Sandy and Trey podcast and just sit here and chit chat for a little while. We've got some more like structure for our listeners today. So um, I'd love to dive in a little bit deeper on what Butler Snow is doing and kind of how your work really has evolved over the years. And this blending of law and economic development and finance is pretty unique. Can you talk a little bit more about that, Trey?
Absolutely. I mean, they really go hand in hand. The law firm, of course, is full service. So we have litigators, we have healthcare lawyers, we have lobbyists, et cetera. However, the public finance, tax incentives, and credit markets group is about 45 to 50 lawyers strong. We're consistently ranked in the top 10 in the country in terms of deal flow. Um, we we get into some really sophisticated types of transactions. And so whether they're public transactions like an airport or a stadium, so we finance the Atlanta Braves Stadium, we finance the Denver Broncos Stadium, the New Orleans Airport. The list goes on, and so I could talk about some of my specific projects as well. Working currently on a $100 million project for Spelman College. So whether it's a public deal or private, and by private, we represented Amazon in a $10 billion data center project in Mississippi, and there are other projects that are also percolating around the Southeast that we also have our tentacles on as well on the private side of transactions. And those get complicated because sometimes they have and require state legislation, full approval of the legislature, and you are really getting into the weeds in really tailoring the incentive package to fit the specific project. So from the standpoint of the practice group, that's what we do. We have a significant presence in Colorado in terms of public finance. We have a very strong tax department. And so when you're issuing tax exempt bonds, if you recall, IEDC put out some literature at one point in the year. Nathan was talking heavily about the preservation of tax exempt status for municipalities and counties, public issuers, because so much of our economic development infrastructure, whether it's water, sewer, whether it's roads, bridges, et cetera, depends on tax exempt status. And the federal government, in their infinite wisdom, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, decided to give these types of entities tax exempt status so that they could actually access the market and do so in a way to provide savings to taxpayers. So that's the whole point. You're trying to finance an asset or an item or a thing, and do so where it is at an advantage to taxpayers that are bearing the brunt of these public improvements sometimes.
It's interesting. You talk like a lawyer, with, some of the details and that element, but you've got this, like, investment, good for all, appropriate element of accessibility and equity and things like that, that has this economic development approach and angle. Talk to us a little bit about kind of what came first, or why this blending of law and economic development, and how that came to be.
Sure. So I got my start actually in 2004. I was a project manager for the Mississippi Development Authority here in Mississippi. And Leland Speed, God rest his soul, was the executive director. Haley Barber was the governor of the state of Mississippi. And Grace Swope is perhaps a name that you've heard in economic development, was the deputy director of MDA. But I was a brand new project manager, and those were quite important jobs because you were the tip of the spear. You were the direct contact for the state of Mississippi with respect to prospects that were interested in either locating in Mississippi, or perhaps you were actually going out and outwardly marketing to certain companies at trade shows, or maybe even with your utility provider setting up calls where you were on the road visiting with companies that had been properly vetted that might have had an interest in expanding or relocating. And so through that role and that job is where I even heard the term economic development. One of the key components of every project that I worked on at that point in time were lawyers. When it got down to structuring the deal, they were instrumental. They were vital to every project. And they were so very well respected, and they worked hand in hand in tandem with the state and project managers, whether it was the in-house counsel at the Mississippi Development Authority or some of the outside counsel. And with respect to most, I won't say all, but most projects, there was always some component of financing to get the project done, either on the corporate, private transactional side or the public. And given that I worked for the state, I was always very attuned to what was happening with respect to the public side of the transaction. And I gravitated towards it. So even throughout law school, I knew that I did not want to be a litigator. I didn't want to be in the courtroom. Even though my dad jokes, even now to today, he says, you're not a real lawyer, right? I'm like, what do you mean? You don't go to court. You see, Tom Cruise and A Few Good Men giving that closing statement, and you've got, I gave the code red, so that's not me. I am in the boardroom. I do advocate very aggressively for my clients. I do sometimes have to get loud, but it's not in front of a judge, he or she wearing a black robe. It's in a boardroom or a city council meeting or behind closed doors in that type of environment. So the equity side of practicing law and doing economic development, I'm from Mississippi, and it's a unique state. And so growing up here and going through the ranks of practicing law at a firm like mine that was founded in 1954, the same year that Brown versus the Board of Education was founded. And so there are just unique things about growing up here and growing up a certain way. And so I care a great deal about the disadvantaged. I care a great deal about mentoring and seeing certain people represented, seeing certain projects happen. And so I will get in there and roll up my sleeves to make sure certain things that may seem difficult to do or impossible, that they come to realization that they're fruitful projects that matter and mean something to the greater good.
I'm sure over that your career, you've had mentors that have helped you, that have um, opened a door, or my partner always says, you want advocates that are there in the room when you are not. And what does that look like? Who is there inviting you into the room, or speaking your praise when you're not around? Talk to us a little bit about mentorship and how that has helped to shape you and your career.
So I'm gonna take a step back again and talk about my time at MDA. There was in 2004, there was this lawyer who was always mentioned. His name was Frank Stimley. Frank was the first black lawyer in the state of Mississippi who was listed in the Red Book. The Red Book is essentially a book that represents lawyers, financial advisors, certain types of financial institutions that have done a certain amount of transactions that say equal $1 billion. I can't remember what the threshold is, but Frank was the guy. Frank Everybody talked about Frank. Well, if you want to go to law school, you need to be like Frank. If you want to do this, you need to be like Frank. Unfortunately, I never got an opportunity to meet Frank. He's the mentor I never met. He passed away in 2004. However, much of my career has been modeled after a man I never met. And I take that to heart. I take that to heart in the young lawyer that I actually mentor, who I drove up to Oxford, Mississippi, and gave her her offer when she was still in law school. And now we're like family. But I, coming up through the ranks of the law firm, I was very non-traditional because I had worked prior to law school. And after law school, I clerked for a federal judge. Even though, Sandy, I knew I didn't want to litigate, but if you get a federal clerkship, it's only 2 or 3 students in your class are going to get a federal clerkship. So that's something that you do, and it just adds value that you've clerked and you've seen. Maybe it's a transaction that broke down and it's being litigated in federal court, but you learn so much in that seat, sitting next to the judge, drafting his or her orders and doing the research. And I then worked at another law firm that I'd summered for during law school, doing public finance, transactional work, but this was during the recession. There was just not a lot of deal flow. And so that's one of the worst things for a young lawyer. You don't really have the ability to go out and get your own work. That would be like um, one of your colleagues that works at your firm, and they're brand new out of college, and you just tell them, "Hey, go get clients and figure out how to." Like, no, that's not really. But you truly become and learn how to practice law by doing. It's really an apprenticeship type profession. So worked there for a year and a half, and then got an offer to go work in the governor's office in Mississippi. And so I was the governor's economic development policy advisor and lawyer. And the reason that that opportunity came about is that I worked at MDA, I had an MBA, and during the governor's, I published a few things as well while at Balch and Bingham. But while the governor had just recently gotten elected, during his transition, he put together all these different types of transition committees: healthcare, education, corrections. But I happened to be on the economic development transition committee. I think I was the only black guy in the room, the youngest in the room, and I was like, hand up, just talking ideas. And the next thing I know, um, the one of the partners whose offices was next door to mine at Balch, he said, "You're going to get a call." I'm like, "All right, great. Um, it's going to be an offer that you can't really turn down, so you need to think long and hard. The governor's going to call you, and so be it." I did get a call. It was the governor of the state of Mississippi asking me to join the staff. And I did that for 19 months. I told him I would do it for 18, but I did it for 19 and I learned everything. I was supposed to be leadership Mississippi class that I'd just gotten my application approved. The firm was going to pay for it, but there was no way to do both. So in my practice at Butler Snow, didn't really have a lot of just mentors. It was a lot of figuring things out. I had um, investment bankers in the profession that I would call on. And so, with respect to my mentee now, as a result of that struggle, I didn't really want her to have to do the same thing. So, I've probably gone beyond the pale to make sure her experience is one that's, paved with a smoother road than mine.
Yeah, I don't know how many job offers are delivered in person with a ride like that. So I think that, really kind of showing her who you are and that you are invested in her future, and you're going to start that from, you know, day one or before, in this instance. And that's pretty amazing. One of the things, you and I had spoken a little bit before this call, and you had shared one of her recent successes and accomplishments, or I guess recognition as a rising star in the industry. And that's pretty amazing that I think you received that award a few years earlier, and then she did. So you are certainly doing something right to help her to be in the right room, working on the right projects, not just taking all the credit yourself, but really letting her shine.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And it's not lost on me that we're the only two lawyers in the firm that have received that recognition, which is the Bond Buyer Rising Star. The Bond Buyer is a centuries old publication focused on the public finance industry, published in New York. It's something that, as public finance professionals, we all keep up with, and we're looking at the various types of articles that are coming out. And so once a year, the bond buyer selects 28 professionals under the age of 40. Again, I stress that 28 professionals. So Charity was chosen out of 28 folks throughout the entire United States. And you can be a lawyer, financial advisor, work for one of our three major credit agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, which is S&P, or Fitch. You could be a bond insurer, investment banker, et cetera. And so when you see the list and how varied it is and how impressive these people are, I am so very proud of her and all of her accomplishments. When she sets her mind to something, she does it. And so when when I made the offer, not only did I think she was very capable, and so her story, she was born and raised in Kenya, and she moved to the States to attend Cornell University. So she's really smart. And then she wanted to be in a really warm climate, and she moved to Mississippi to attend law school. And so she summered for us for 2 summers as a summer associate, and that's the law school. That's the job equivalent of putting you through the ringer as a law student, giving you all the various types of assignments, taking you to dinner.
The really glamorous ones. You just have them do really glamorous stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Taking you to
Yeah.
dinner. Can you talk? Can you have a cocktail and not crash? Things like that. Just, emotional intelligence, all the different things that we're checking for. But she was phenomenal, and I truly needed the help. I had a practice that was growing and growing, and I could not do it all by myself. And she was the perfect complement to my practice. And now she is a rising star, handling $100 million transactions as underwriters counsel, doing securities law. And so our about 60% of our work is public finance. which ranges from, looking at complicated tax questions, securities law questions, and then 40% of our work is on the private side, working with developers or companies. So she's phenomenal. The best thing about her probably is, though, her son is my wife and I. He's our godson. He's a 2-year-old, and so with us being empty nesters now, that's been fun. Just getting him on the weekends or on a Saturday, going to the park. So we're family. It's she can't get rid of me. I can't get rid of her. So it's great. It's a great relationship.
It sounds so special and absolutely beautiful. And I'm sure you don't, but don't take that for granted. That's, a really amazing work that has evolved into, a personal, which is all life is, about relationships that we have, and our friends and family and those that we get to know in life. That's pretty amazing. I love that you have that relationship with her. That's
I'll,
great.
I'll be expecting my invitation to dinner with you and Bob soon. So I appreciate that.
Perfect. Yes,
Yeah.
you're in anytime. Yes. It's interesting. I think about my team. There are 8 of us. This time of year, we've got an intern that has just came back yesterday. Actually, she was here at the beginning of the summer, worked through the summer, and then came back. So we are, a strong 8-person team right now. But I think about these, young. They're all younger than I am. But this young team that and thinking about um, how to. Um, lift them up, how to be hard on them, with so that they learn. We all need to learn and retain that life isn't all just about a bunch of participation trophies, that we all have to like work hard, and some environments are more competitive than others, but figuring out how to support, retain, kind of cultivate talent, and what that looks like. I'm curious if you've got any advice for me or for others that are listening, on what we could or should be doing to support this next generation of colleagues.
I I I'll say this. I think that we're so busy with our mobile phones, with social media, with just these devices. And I would like, not only for others but for myself as well. I could take a lesson from what I'm about to say as well, but just being more present and in the moment, being very intentional. I truly believe that mentorship goes both ways. I think I need to listen to people that have experienced things before me, that may have more wisdom than me with respect to the lived experience and age. However, I think there's a tremendous amount of value in talking to a young person, because we have blinders on. We cannot see behind us. There are so many things that we may have, some just different type peccadillos that we could learn from the youth. And so I just think that's very important, that we really get out of our echo chambers, that we communicate, that we steel man arguments instead of straw manning them. And if there's a better way to do something, we listen, and we don't judge, and we critique it, and we move on without humiliation. So I think that can be solved with respect to being more present and having more fruitful conversations.
I think that's great advice. Thank you. Yes. Bob and I were talking about that disconnecting piece of things, but not just with colleagues, not just with teammates, but with one another and family. And we were talking about going camping. I'm not a huge camper, not my favorite thing, but I said I would be open to that, really, because I would just like the idea of sitting outside, cell phones either at home or locked in the car, and just to sit around a campfire and
Oh, for sure.
talk instead of being distracted by a device and what we could be missing. I guarantee we're not actually missing anything that you're not going to catch up on when you get back to it 2 days later or whatever.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. So let's take each other's advice, disconnect for a little bit, and just enjoy some time. Like I gave a speech yesterday, and it was something I really worked on. I really prepared. I really wanted to be thoughtful and very intentional about the words that I chose in terms of really providing something meaningful for the students. So I'm a graduate of Tougaloo College, and yesterday we had the presidential convocation, and essentially it's where brand new students make a public proclamation about their education and saying that they're going to be Tougaloo students. And so the goal and the task for me was to just talk about scholarship, the academy being what does it mean to be a Tougaloo student. And so in preparation for that and getting back to your comment about nature, Tougaloo sits in two counties, Hines County and Madison County. It sits in two cities, and two interstates essentially run through our property. One, in fact, runs literally right through our property line, and our property buttresses one of the fastest growing thoroughfares or corridors in the country. Billions of dollars of investment are on this major thoroughfare called Highland Colony Parkway. It's actually where my law firm is right now, where I'm looking at you as I see traffic bustling back and forth. And before that speech to prepare, I drove up to Tougaloo College. I walked around and I sat under one of the same trees that I sat under as a student. I took my shoes off. I took my socks off, and I embraced my Walt Whitman. I was just like, let me just get in there and feel the grass. What was the poem? I can't remember now. But or was it Henry David Thoreau? One of our American transcendentalist poets talked about Walden's Pond and how important that is. And when you look at the research with respect to nature and connecting with nature and disconnecting from these things, I think it's important. And maybe that was it. Maybe that was the extra oomph that I needed to really convey what I conveyed to those students on yesterday. So, yes, go camping. I will go to the beach or the mountains. I'm going to try. Maybe I'm going to add that to the list for 26. Trey will go camping with Monty.
Okay,
This will
I'm
be
writing it down. You hear my pen click? I'm writing
I
that
hear it.
down. Uh,
Pen don't film me now.
yeah, I think that, I mean, you took the idea of like getting yourself grounded before giving a big talk, and quite literally, and to sit there by the tree for a minute and yeah, be very present with yourself so that you could be present for these new students that were probably trying to figure out what was the point. Why am I here? What is this guy going to talk about? That how can I relate to him? What is it? I'd love for you to share, kind of that call to action or that charge for the students
Sure.
that you shared with your talk.
So a couple of things that I really honed in on but I started with introducing them to me, because you just said, like, who is this guy? So sure, there's one thing to read a bio. He's a lawyer. He does economic development. I don't really know what that is. So basically, I tried to connect with him and said that I'm just like you. I grew up here. My mom was a school teacher for 28 and a half years. My father, he was a letter carrier for the United States Post Office for 32 years. I grew up on, going to the farm every summer, bush hogging, riding horses, getting the cows wormed and going to the sale barn. And then on the 4th of July, which is the date that my grandfather, my dad's dad, was born, we're always in Columbus, Mississippi for the 4th of July. And we did that after he passed away in 1986. And then I really started talking about some of the history of Tougaloo College. Its profound impact during the civil rights movement with leaders like Dr. King, who took safe haven behind our walls, leaders like the Tougaloo Nine, who went to an all-white library in Jackson and did a read-in, and they took nothing with them but the Constitution, bravery and courage, and their bodies. I talked about how what I mentioned earlier about being in echo chambers and still manning arguments instead of straw manning arguments. I talked about finding a mentor, like one of my mentors, either find a big brother or a big sister. And then I just talked about the fragility of democracy right now in terms of where we are in our country and how it's up to them to lead the way. I mentioned one of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain. The two most important days of your life are the day that you're born and the day that you find out why. And the first part of that equation, that they were born, they're living proof that you're sitting here, you're listening, you're taking what I'm saying in, you're imbibing it. But the second part, the why, hopefully something I said during those roughly 28 minutes, I talked a long time. Hopefully they they picked up something that will get them to their why. And maybe they might be the next person to lead in a significant way. Maybe they're the next educator, the next doctor, the next lawyer, the next economic developer or developer. But in doing it, do it with bravery, do it with courage, lead with conviction, lead with ethics and integrity, and most importantly, empathy.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think that figuring out your why, what is our life's work, what is our purpose on this earth, what is, yeah, what are we here to do? How are we going to make the world in whatever size and shape that means a little bit better than we found it? And I love that you, in talking with new students, uh, one of the things that you and I have talked about is this idea of brain drain. And we, teased it. I mean, at the beginning of this episode. But here we're in a room full of students, and at this beautiful HBCU in Mississippi. Did you talk about staying afterwards, and how to the education that you're getting here in Mississippi, and what can you do later? How is it important I guess to get that information out there, and kind of reinvesting in the communities that are helping in the example of these students. How do you give back? How do you get them to stay in the state that
Yeah.
has raised them?
You know, I not all of the students obviously were from Mississippi, but
Sure.
they made a decision to come to Tougaloo College. And Tougaloo has just a rich, rich history. And with respect to the brain drain, I've been a Mississippian all my life. I think I left once on a year-long exchange program that was done through the college. Tougaloo has a wonderful sister school relationship with Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. And we celebrated that relationship. I want to say it was last summer in Washington, D.C. And over I think it's 60 or 64 years that the relationship has been going on. And so I was able to attend Brown in the fall of 1999. And then I went to NYU in New York City, which complete stark difference from Providence, Rhode Island. But that year-long exchange really framed a lot of different things with respect to home and being away. And so, yeah, I made a concerted effort to stay. I did. And I did talk about that during the speech. I also talked about it a month ago to the day. Today's the 28th. And on July 28th, last month, there was a half day conference called All In on Mississippi. And it was sponsored by an organization called Deep South Today. That is a nonprofit digital newsroom, or rather, it's the parent of a host of different newsrooms throughout the Southeast, in both Mississippi and Louisiana. So during that half day conference, there was a conversation with Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO and chairman of JP Morgan Chase. And it's not every day that the number one of the largest financial institution in the world comes to your state for a one-on-one conversation with the CEO of Deep South Today. And that was compelling, hearing the different types of questions and the thought process of someone that leads a company so large. I mean, they're on the Fortune top 10 of companies, and he was right here. I was, on the front row, and I did get a chance to ask him a question, Sandy. I think I said, so I had this long, like, goofy lead in about, all these platitudes. And then I said, now, I would like to know what you will be doing on November 8th, Tuesday, November 8th, 2028. I think that was the date. It might have been the 7th, but I had it right for that particular day. And he looked at me and he thought, and everybody, there was kind of the gasp in the room, like, why in the hell is he asking about a date in 28? And then he got it.
Mhm.
And he laughed and he's like, well, hopefully I'll be having a martini and I will just have voted. Because I think Jamie Dimon is running for president. I think he is doing this bus tour throughout the South. Mark my words. We'll go back and revisit this podcast.
I heard it here.
Ray broke it here first on August 28th. Jamie Dimon is running for president. But he talked about a lot of different things. And then during that conference, I had an opportunity to introduce a topic that I care about deeply. I think it's something that impacts my state. I think it's a huge economic development problem that we have to solve. And as you know, as an economic developer as well, workforce is a challenge. It's just something that we have to deal with. Another thing that we have to deal with is housing. I think workforce, housing, quality of life, those three things, and there are others, but I think those are three of the legs of the stool, have a huge impact on brain drain. One thing that I focused on, however, particularly with a state like Mississippi, with a history like ours, that I think that we can overcome, that I think that we can write a better story. But I talked about some of the systems that are in place that actually make people want to leave, and fighting those systems and trying to dismantle those systems so that the weakest among us can be one of our strengths. I think that's important in any type of SWOT analysis that's done. Identifying the weaknesses, and I truly and firmly and solemnly believe that there is a way to make our weaknesses, which happens to be some of our disadvantaged communities and the people that live in them. I think that that people like me, people in Greenville, people in Clarksdale, people in throughout the Mississippi Delta, people in Jackson, I truly believe our people are our greatest asset. And investment in people has the ability to change the trajectory of this state forever.
I totally agree. I think that you're right. Your example and your kind of headset focus is on the South and in Mississippi, but obviously other areas are had the same struggle for a lack of opportunities or a lack of an environment so that people can make their own opportunities and figure out what that looks like. It's so much easier said than done. I understand that. But how can we be putting tools in place to figure out what our weaknesses are and address them, start changing things. We don't have to do things and shouldn't be doing things the way that we have for the last 10, 15, 20, hundreds of years. And there's that freshman class that you were talking with this week. We all think that there's something bigger and brighter for us elsewhere. So I want to go see what that thing is. I love your Brown, your Rhode Island, your New York examples that you tipped your toe in it and said, this is great, but it's not great for me. So I'm going to go back to where I can really feel my own why and why am I here? And so that's what I'm hearing from you. And I think it's amazing that you have been able to create this life and career in a community, in a state that you have so much pride for.
Yeah, it's not been without a tremendous amount of struggle and hard work.
Yeah.
I, if I were to be asked, why did you stay, Trey? What made you stay? Probably had a chip on my shoulder after knowing the story of Frank Stimley, who died young from a heart attack. No one had ever done it before besides him. There were two other lawyers of color who were at my law firm prior to me in the same role doing public finance, and they ultimately chose to leave and go in a different direction. But if I were to speak with them, I'm sure their stories would be similar to mine in terms of the struggles, in terms of not truly being given some of the opportunities that you might. And so it could be as simple as, hey, I want to work on a certain type of transaction. And as a young lawyer, you don't have your own work. And so it is incumbent upon the senior lawyer or partner to get the younger lawyer involved to see certain types of transactions. And there's a particular type of transaction that in my career, I only got a chance to see that type of structure and that type of deal because I brought the work myself. Because I was able to, after I've been here long enough, I was able to lure a client in, and then I had the ability to say, I have this. Now you have to help me with this to help me structure it. And then the beauty of that is once you see it one or two times, you then have the ability to kind of say, all right, now I have my bearings. But that's pretty daunting when there's something that you truly want to do and you can't just take it. Someone actually has to invite you in. And so, yes, there are absolutely systems that may be invisible to the naked eye that are there. And the only reason that I stayed in this role, in this particular practice area, in this area in terms of the profession is because I said, I will not be defeated. I will be very good at this. Not only will I be good at this, I will be the best. So, full circle, charity. I don't want her to have to take the detour down this road to stay up to read the transcript. I'm not going to go into great detail, but there are certain things that barriers that I have the ability to remove from her now that I'm a partner with a book of business that, maybe $3, $4, $5 million, because I have the ability to staff her up with work. But I'll say this. I don't necessarily want her I don't want to be the only lawyer that she works with. I want her to learn from other lawyers as well. I want her, if she has an experience or has a desire to work in tax specifically, I want her to see it. And she is. Like, I sent that recommendation. I wrote the email numerous times. I put it in various places so leadership could say, all right, let's get her involved here and get experience with other lawyers. And because I stayed, because I fought through what I had to fight through, um, because I didn't leave, even though my story is quite similar to those other lawyers who I still talk to, I now have the ability to do this for charity. Another really good example, I had an assistant who worked actually at the Mississippi Development Authority. And she had a master's in public administration, and she had her undergraduate degree in foreign language and something else that was pretty impressive. And I knew she should not be an assistant, even though she had been an MDA for a while. She was African American, and my wife had worked at MDA. She knew I needed a new assistant because there was a lot of turnover, retiring, and things like that. And she connected us, and then I was able to go to my leadership and say, I would like to recruit her to be an assistant for me in charity. Well, quickly learned that she was way overqualified, and I already knew that, but I knew she could do more. And so she ultimately stayed here 2 years and left to become an investment banker. And I gave her the encouragement. I would stay on her about, like, hey, are you studying? But she got a job, and she is, I believe, one test away from being fully licensed. That's a tough profession as well, but I knew that she would not be here long. And whether she went to go be a trustee, whether she went back to went to law school, or went to become an investment banker, what I truly wanted was for her to live out her full potential and find her why as well. I say all that to say I could not do that if I were in another state. I could not usher in the new public finance lawyers or anybody who is interested in law school, or whether it's engineering, because my work touches so many different things with architects, engineers, construction, environmental, real estate. Like, we're the tip of the spear. Nothing is done unless the money flows, and we make the money flow.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. And I keep thinking about, examples or how to make this applicable for an economic developer and to hear it. And I'm hearing it in every sentence and every example that you're sharing. We think about the someone new to economic development that sees these problems, sees these challenges, and
there may not be a playbook for what their problem is and then what they're working on, but they need to create it. And that's the beauty of this work that we get to do is I always say that the storytelling that we do isn't Mad Libs for economic development. Like it's actually it's different, it's custom, it's unique for the community, unique for the organization, for the goals for the humans that are reading the information. And so how do we do that? How do we tell stories? How do we solve problems that are unique? And they might not work the first time or two or three that we try to implement a new program that has never been created before. But we have to keep trying. We have to keep working to figure this out, whether it's a brain drain workforce housing or issue, or some new law that's been implemented that needs to be communicated, or that is hindering growth that needs to be removed, or whatever that challenge happens to be. So
Absolutely.
it's interesting. Yeah, I appreciate that your angle and your examples. That's great. We knew this was going to run long. We knew we were going to be talking for a while. So I'm going to ask if there is anything else that you would like to share with our listeners before I ask my final question. Anything that you were like, oh my gosh, I hope that Sandy asks me about blah, 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 because I really want to talk about, or drop a nugget of thoughts.
Maybe not necessarily advice, but encouragement, a charge, perhaps. I think IEDC is a wonderful organization, and it has brought me so many different things from an educational standpoint, from a relationship standpoint. We are here today in this very forum because of IEDC, and I've made a new friend. So I would encourage your listeners to become a member, get involved, because that is where the real work is being done. That's where the change agents are. And I actually had an idea as you were talking. I think there may be an opportunity, or there's a need perhaps to create something talking about a playbook for deals, like maybe take every year the top 10 economic development deals of the year, and don't just write about them from the standpoint, this is the deal, but write about it from the standpoint of the practitioner and how we can usher in the new economic developers to lead by example, something that they can use as a toolkit for these are the deals and this is what made these deals happen. More than an article, but more of a training.
You're right. Like seeing how picture perfect everything looks at the end or when it's reported out, that is not.
It is messy. Yes.
Yes. And you're right. It doesn't need to be this top secret thing as to how muddy it gets leading up to that point of success. So I like that fun little playbook. Cool. The last question that we like to ask our guests, this podcast is called the EDO Breakthrough, and because we were hoping that our listeners and colleagues would be able to share their their why, their wow, their aha moment, whatever it was within economic development. So I would love to know what was your EDO breakthrough?
Wow. I would likely say it was during Katrina, which we're now, this is the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. She was wreaking havoc in the Caribbean, headed towards the Gulf 20 years ago today. When I was at MDA, we were working on a major project to lure Kia to Mississippi. And after Katrina, during that process, she was barreling our way, and we had several Koreans in Mississippi that were visiting the state, And it was so vital to see these sites because we'd spent a great deal of money, but we wanted them to be safe at the same time. But seeing, I guess, the fundamental importance of economic development with respect to disaster recovery and how those things go hand in hand was truly a breakthrough moment for me. I think from the legislative standpoint and seeing brilliant minds come together to determine how to facilitate growth and a renaissance and rebirth and reconstruction, it truly made me at that point in time say, I'm going to be in this profession for the long haul. I probably the one of the most important parts of that is the week after Katrina, I was supposed to go to my basic economic development course at the University of Southern Mississippi. Hattiesburg was in complete disarray. And so obviously I was not able to take those courses in 2005. It would be 2008 while a law student during my spring break that I drove my old clunker to Little Rock, Arkansas, and I paid for my classes out of my own pocket. And I took the basic course in Little Rock, and I can't remember. The guy's name is Ron Swagger. We celebrated him not too terribly long ago because I teach now at the University of Southern Mississippi in the True South course. Oh, it's called Mid-South in Little Rock. And so that breakthrough moment of Katrina, seeing how important economic development was, missing those classes, spending my own money in 2008, waiting until 2017 after I became a partner here to then go to OU EDI and to then sit for my exam in 2022, I think it means something. And so the why, obviously, I'm living out some of my why, but we continue to hone the why. The why continues to live and breathe. And so I think there's something there. There's a reason why I got my certification in economic development. I think it helps my practice. I think it makes me a more informed lawyer while I'm dealing with public clients when they're making decisions. And I think it will shape what I do next.
I love it. Thank you for that story. And yes, when we think about, the 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina and all of the other disasters that have happened and how this, our economic development colleagues and partners help their communities to rebuild, rebound, in whether it's a natural disaster or otherwise, is really beautiful work. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for making me smile today. Thank you for, being here. And I thank you for this. I think that our listeners have hopefully enjoyed, as I have, our conversation. And to be continued. Trey, thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
To our listeners, share this episode, leave a review, do all of those things, and we will see you back on the next episode of the EDO Breakthrough Podcast. Until next time.
The EDO Breakthrough Podcast is brought to you by PPR Strategies. PPR Strategies, standing for People and Places Reimagined, is a strategic consulting firm working specifically with EDOs and other place-based organizations. We share the unique stories of communities through communication, strategic planning, marketing, media relations, and more. Visit us at pprstrategies.com and find our contact information in the show notes. I'd like to give a big thank you to you for listening. Remember, together we are unstoppable.